Remaking Middle School is launching a middle school listening tour. We want to know what comes to mind when you hear middle school. What do you think is and isn't working for middle school students today? What is the future of middle level education? If you are any of the following, a parent, a teacher, administrator, youth development professional, policymaker, or youth advocate of middle grade students, we would love to hear from you. There are two ways in which you can lend your voice to this project. You can complete an online survey. The survey will take about 10 minutes to complete. Or you can chat with a member of the Remaking Middle School team. Interviews take about 30 to 45 minutes of your time and can be done by phone or Zoom. If you're interested in sharing your perspective on middle school education, please visit remakingmiddleschool.org and click Sign Up for the listening tour. Hi, this is Jason Cascarino. Thanks for listening to the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, a production of the Remaking Middle School Initiative, whose founding partners include Youth-Nex, the University of Virginia's Center to Promote Effective Youth Development, and the Association for Middle Level Education, or AMLE. You can learn about Remaking Middle School on the web at remakingmiddleschool.org. Now, here's this episode. Hello and welcome to the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, where we explore the many facets that impact young adolescents in the middle school years, from the adverse to the awkward to the awesome. I'm your host, Jason Cascarino. Today, I talk with Nadia Selby and Elizabeth Micci from Citizen Schools, a 25-year-old Boston-based nonprofit that offers middle school-age youth experiential learning opportunities through a blend of out-of-school time programming, in-school professional development, and community partnerships. Nadia is a veteran of the organization, having worked there for some 14 years, and is currently Vice President of Programs. Elizabeth is Managing Director of Catalyst, Citizen Schools' teacher development model. The driving force behind all of Citizen Schools' work is embedding experiential learning opportunities into the educational experience, both in school and out of school, which is a powerful way to keep youth in the middle grades engaged and on track.
What we felt within Citizen Schools as to why middle school is that age range to kind of really focus a lot of our energy on, it is because it's that make or break point. If a student really just stops getting excited about coming to school, they're not even making it to high school. By high school, they're dropping out. So what we wanted to focus on is how do you excite students and get them to understand what are the things within education that really connects to them and really pushes them forward. But in the same vein, we also want to make sure our educators understand how to excite our young people in these ways.
In part one of our conversation, Nadia, Elizabeth, and I talk about the history of Citizen Schools and how it has evolved over time, including spanning both the out-of-school and in-school domains. In part two, we delve into the ways in which the organization establishes partnerships with educators and mentors, schools and companies to deliver real-world experiential learning, how they develop high-quality talent and mentors to serve as the second shift of educators, and how out-of-school time programming, people, and resources can be leveraged to expand the capacity of schools. That's in just a little bit. Now, here's part one of my interview with Nadia Selby and Elizabeth Micci. Nadia, Elizabeth, it's a delight to talk with you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
You appreciate it.
Well, I like to be transparent with listeners to the podcast, and in this case, I want to share that I am a staff alumnus of Citizen Schools. This will show my age, which I can more easily hide when there's no video, of course, but my tenure at Citizen Schools was in the mid-2000s. I worked for the organization in Boston around the time of its 10th anniversary, actually. And we'll talk a lot about Citizen Schools and what it has done and what it's doing today. But let's start by talking a bit about the two of you. Nadia, you go back almost as far with Citizen Schools as I do, but not quite. I don't think we overlapped. But it does mean that you've been with the organization a long time. You are now Vice President of Program, but tell us about how you first got involved with Citizen Schools and how your tenure started.
Yeah, thank you for that. It has been a very long time. I've been at Citizen Schools now for 14 years. And when I actually joined Citizen Schools, I started really while I was in college. So I went to Mass, stopped doing nursing, and actually went to do what I wanted to do, which was education, and went to UMass Boston. And while there, I got introduced to Citizen Schools and started as a teaching associate, part-time, working in Mattapan, Massachusetts at the Mildred, and really got a chance to get to know a lot of students. And then from there, I joined a teaching fellowship at Citizen Schools, and it's been a journey since then.
That's awesome. And just a little bit of for the listeners, the Citizen Schools lingo. When you say the Mildred, that is a school, an actual school and a campus, which other people around the country probably just want to make sure that people pick up on how Citizen Schoolers talk. So, Elizabeth, you are newer to Citizen Schools. It looks like you came to the organization after having spent some time in the classroom. Tell us what drew you to the world of education.
Yeah, thank you. I am fairly new addition to the team. I've just passed the year mark, which was really exciting. And I did come from school-based work prior. So I've been a teacher and an academy administrator and a high school principal in both public and independent schools, often working with high need populations, even in the private space. And also in schools, most recently in a school that really prioritized experiential learning. So Citizen Schools offered a great opportunity to sort of marry all my different interests. So it was great. It was really exciting to join the team and to work with Nadia. So it's been a really great journey so far.
Terrific. Well, let's get into the aspects of Citizen Schools that I think are the kind of classic hallmarks of the organization. Nadia, let's start with you. Eric Schwartz, who co-founded the organization in the mid-1990s with Ned Reimer. He was CEO of the organization when I worked there and also when you started out with the organization. He's still on the board. But since he's not here, share, if you will, a bit of the history of Citizen Schools, why Eric and Ned founded it, what did they want to do, what impact did they want to make?
Yes, so Eric and Ned, two funny guys, by the way, and really just really down to earth and really understanding what's needed within communities to kind of push education forward. And I think for them, as they were in their incubator, really thinking about ways to impact the community and really push education to the next level, Citizen Schools was born. And it essentially came out of this notion of really a way to engage citizens. So the name actually comes from engaging citizens of the community in a school environment, working with young people, but not the traditional way. So Citizen Schools was founded to essentially create opportunities for hands-on learning, hands-on engaging activities with citizens from the community leading that engagement.
And the organization, I think, has done a really nice job in evolving over the times. It strikes me that Citizen Schools has always stayed true to its core, that experiential learning, that mentoring, career exploration, and of course a focus on middle grades. Let's not forget that. But it has really found different expressions of those, if you will. Nadia, in your role as Vice President of Programs, maybe give us a broad view, if you will, of this evolution from, say, after school to extended learning time and now working in schools and community settings, as well as the out-of-school time space. And then, Elizabeth, you can expand upon that by talking more deeply about catalysts, which is your domain.
Yeah, so we have evolved, but we evolved based off of our foundation, and what we learned actually is making a difference within our young people. And I would say when we first started 25, 26 years ago now, we were just an after-school program. We evolved from just being in an after-school program into what we called expanded learning time, ELT for short. My Citizen Schools lingo is hard. It's been 14 years for me to let that go. But our expanded learning time, ELT, it started in Massachusetts, where students got out of school very early at the end of the day. So school was ending at 1:30. Parents wouldn't be home until 5. So what happens in between that time? And part of the notion of this expanded learning time was to create opportunities where students could actually stay in school. And we had a second shift of educators, our teaching fellows, coming in to lead and continue to learning, but in a different way. So our learning was more focused on applying what the students were learning again in the first half of the day. Now in the second half of the day and bringing in members of the community to connect with that. But what if our students had this opportunity to do this all day? And what kind of, what learning would happen if you were able to actually engage and support our teachers in creating these opportunities for young people to apply what they're learning right in that classroom? And that's where our Catalyst program and the ways in which we build out our teacher education development, that's where that was born from. Like, how do we get other folks to do this? And how do we get educators in the traditional school day to start adopting some of these strategies that we're seeing work in after school, and really engaging students in content and really seeing them push the work forward. Since then, we've also done a lot of work outside of just citizen schools, working with community organizations, post-secondary organizations through our Makers and Mentors network, really supporting them and really building these communities of practice where we're able to connect with other organizations who are interested in experiential learning, who want to get and start doing this work. How can we support you and teach you how to do it effectively based off of our history and the challenges? Like, let's not have everyone repeat the challenges and the issues that we had.
Right, and I want to talk a little bit more about Makers and Mentors in a little bit. But Elizabeth, I had Jody Grant, who's head of the After School Alliance, on in our first season, and I sort of made this observation that, it's interesting that I feel like out of school time programs have been pressured over the years to be more like school, to get more outcomes like school. And I kind of feel like it's sort of the reverse now in some ways, that, the school day should be a little bit more like the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of different types of learning opportunities that are often available in out of school time settings. So I feel like Catalyst is sort of like this opportunity to bring some of those elements into the classroom. So tell us a little bit more about Catalyst.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the shift to working in the school day did come partially from an awareness that the environment, the landscape has changed. You're seeing increasingly, and probably even more so now in the wake of the pandemic, discussions around how to make the schooling experience feel really relevant for what students are going to need once they leave school, and an identification of a number of after-school programs as being really where some of the deepest learning is happening. And so how to bring more of that into the school day or make space for it during the school day. And I think Catalyst's strategy is really built around this question of making space and capacity building, because there are no shortage of teachers who already know how to create incredible experiences for students and do. And so what we try to do when we engage with our various communities is really get to know them and know the work that they're already doing and figure out how we can kind of enhance and support that work, rather than saying, we have like a new way of doing things that we want you to apply. And so our training is pretty individualized. Teachers work with us for 10 weeks. And they choose a project that they're interested in working on. We started with STEM teachers, so projects like kinetic sculpture or climate science or a thermal energy unit. And these units tend to align with the standards that those teachers either are teaching or have just taught or will be teaching. And they do this project as sort of an enrichment to the curriculum, that the base curriculum that they've already worked through or will work through that year with students. And we spend the first 4 to 5 weeks of the training actually working with teachers to understand the structures of the projects, how they were designed, to learn more about the teachers and their classroom profile, and to understand what their goals are and what the culture of their class is like. And of course, as in keeping with the Grand Citizen School traditions, we match them with citizens, with career mentors who come from fields relevant to the project. So we ask our teachers, it's a thermal energy project. Do you want someone who, works on rockets, who actually does this in their sort of day-to-day work environment? We've brought in marketers from companies digital marketers who can teach students how to really enhance their final projects and make them more professional and understand what careers outside the sciences look like. And our teachers will give us a variety of parameters. I want a professional who speaks Spanish. I want somebody who, if possible, struggled in middle school and can talk to students about what struggling in middle school is like. So we do all this preparation, and then our coaches work with the teacher all the way through the 5 or 6 weeks of implementation of the project. And they help them personalize the materials to their own classroom's needs. A lot of our courses that they're essentially taking, these 10-week courses, revolve around different strategies that have to do with things like adapting for a variety of learner profiles in one classroom, getting community involved in the project. And we're also, we work really closely with school leadership and the folks who sort of impact decisions teachers need to make around what they're going to do with their curriculum, to sort of ask, what sort of space is being made in the day? What kind of runway are you giving them structurally to be able to do this and not make it feel like they're sort of constantly, rolling the rock uphill? Because in order for that work to be sustainable, it's about something more than just the teachers, changing their pedagogical practice or adjusting it. It also comes with making sure that the environment is healthy for that and ripe for that kind of work.
So this is not, Catalyst is not a curriculum, it's more like an instructional approach where you say, okay, you have a curriculum, you have things that you are teaching, let's add a different element to it, which is experiential. And the teachers that you say go through a 10-week experience, where are they doing that, or who's doing that for them? And then how do you do and you talked about the sort of the matchmaking of the mentoring.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started off sort of entirely in person, have moved because of COVID to entirely virtual, and are probably going to be embracing a hybrid model going forward, because it's actually amazing some of the access and flexibility that we've been able to build into the program by going online. We actually got incredibly positive responses from teachers when we moved to an online learning management system. So if you're a teacher and you're enrolling with us for the first time, you'd be in our introductory course and you'd tell us which project you want to work on. And so you would join an online community of teachers from all over the country some would be working on the same project, some would be working on different projects. Some would be taking later stage courses with us, meaning they've already done one project. So the content and coaching of their course is different than it is for a first-time teacher. It's been sort of leveled up, and we're building towards teachers being able to design their own projects that don't rely as much on us for the materials and can be even more personalized. But we build this community of practice intentionally. So initially, all of our teachers from all different places at all different stages come together. And in the first 4 weeks, you get your coach right off the bat. So that coach is working with you immediately on understanding your class schedules and times and figuring out what your curricular support needs are going to be, and doing some deep interviewing around what kinds of mentors are you looking for. And those program coaches then work closely with a separate volunteer team that we have on the back end that does an amazing job of recruiting, training, and supporting our volunteers all the way through the process in the same way that a teacher is supported through the process. So our volunteers are matched with a coach similar to the coach that the teachers get, to make sure that everybody is feeling like they really have the backing they need to make the project successful. For some of our volunteers, the last time they were in school was when they were kids. So they're, it's a little daunting to sort of step into a middle school classroom for the first time. And luckily our volunteer team from Citizen School's long history of training citizen teachers is sort of expert at preparing people to feel ready to enter those kinds of spaces. So the burden is really off of you as the teacher to procure that volunteer and get them ready to be in the class. The coaches on both sides set up collaboration calls before the project launches. They set times and dates and sort of backup plans for what happens if somebody's schedule changes at the last minute. And then the teachers launch the projects, and the coaches work with them every step of the way as they're implementing the different milestones of the projects. And the volunteers come in at different strategic points that have been agreed upon. We're hoping to get them back in the classroom physically, but doing this virtually allows us also to bring in volunteers that are not local. So if, for example, you're working on a project that has to do with thermal energy and there aren't a ton of, specialists in that field right locally, we can now, Zoom them in, which is kind of cool because it creates, again, more equity of access for people around the country. But we do love getting local volunteers, and when we can, even better if we can find volunteers that went to that middle school. We really, really try to tap into the community and expand that base as much as possible. And then at the end of the project, in COVID year, we did not do sort of live exhibitions, but in more standard years, the idea is to always have some kind of exhibition, whether virtual or in person at the end of the course, to make sure that students, feel a little bit of those stakes at the end of the project and also have a chance to really show off their work.
Yeah, Nadia, we didn't touch as much upon that, but the notion of this public display afterwards is very developmentally appropriate, right? For maybe you can talk a little bit about how some of the program elements, whether it's in the Catalyst or the extended learning or makers and mentors, which we can talk a little bit about more, how those are kind of connected to this early adolescent time period, particularly. I mean, Eric and Ned sort of chose that period for a particular reason, that this experiential learning would be highly attuned to what those students need in that developmental time period. So just talked about that sort of connection piece.
Yeah, so middle school, it's like the hardest time or the hardest period of adolescence and growing up in childhood in general. It's the time when you're really trying to figure out who you are and what you want to, like how you want to approach your learning, what's important to you, what really stands out. You're also very opinionated. You really want to make sure like fair is fair. Like these are things that really our middle schoolers are struggling with as they start moving from working with one teacher all day long to now working with multiple teachers and having to know different personalities and starting to introduce folks to get ready for high school and college, because middle school is where it starts, where you're starting to really understand that you will need to interact with many different people at many different points. And what we felt within citizen schools as to why middle school is that age range to kind of really focus a lot of our energy on, it is because it's that make or break point. If a student really just stops getting excited about coming to school, they're not even making it to high school. By high school, they're dropping out. So what we wanted to focus on is like, how do you excite students and get them to understand what are the things within education that really connects to them and really pushes them forward. But in the same vein, we also want to make sure our educators understand like how to excite our young people in these ways. So if a student gets excited about working in a law firm or like really working with a lawyer from a law firm, if a student is learning that, can that be an opportunity that where they are moving into high school and wanting to take journalism and wanting to understand debate and do a lot more in different spaces and hopefully go to law school at the end of the day, or go into a field in which they learned or something that was ignited within middle schools. I think about my childhood and what would have happened if I had citizen schools so young and so early on within my trajectory. I probably would have moved through and not went to nursing school. Like I probably would have just went straight to education because that's where I wanted, like that's my house. And I would have knew blood kind of freaks me out. But I didn't have some of those exposures and like really just followed what my family wanted us to do. Like that's where the money was. And it was like, no, there's so many more things that you can do that you're passionate about. And I think through citizen schools, we're able to start having students try out these different things in these different ways of learning. What we found is just like when students are seeing their work move towards something larger and move towards something them being able to present out, one, to their peers, to an authentic audience, to other folks across, now we're doing it across the country, but as folks are getting ready to do these presentations, students take it so seriously. They're like, oh no, like I want to make sure I'm putting my best foot forward. And we love to call those moments the wow moments because one, it's shocking both for the parents. It's shocking for sometimes the teachers to kind of see students really apply themselves in such ways.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like in our space, college and career exploration is typically reserved for older kids. Like when you're in high school, you can start, doing that kind of thing. But developmentally, you're so right that, the early adolescent time period is exactly the time period when young people are going through this process of self-discovery. Like, what do we want? What do I want to be? Who am I? What is my place in the world? And that strikes me as the exact time when you want to expose them to different types of options and different and people who are in those fields, right?
It's like when you get a chance to kind of see some of what you may be interested in, but not quite sure, but you're seeing adults and other folks that are professionals from the community come in and like talk specifically around how they do this level work. And granted, you might not necessarily go into that angle, but it opens your eye that there's more than just the traditional way. Like you could be interested in metabolism. Metabolism is one of our projects for our educator development program. And you could be interested in metabolism, but metabolism is the project that you have. We bring you a nutritionist, we bring you a nurse. Like they're like two different fields, two different areas or ways that you could engage within material. Some of the topics connect to our students. Some of our volunteers and where they come from connect to our students, even though not all of our volunteers connect to the content. The skills in which our volunteers are bringing to support students around problem solving, working collaboratively. Middle schoolers don't get, we weren't exposed to that at that time period. What if we pull all of that work and you're starting in middle school really learning how to collaborate, how to share ideas, how we're all bringing our strengths to the end product. Like those are the moments that we're trying to create early on based off of some of the experience and some of the highs we've seen from our expanded learning time, that after school program.
That was part one of my interview with Nadia Selby and Elizabeth Micci. In part two, we will talk about how Citizen Schools partners with schools and companies, develops and supports mentors and staff, and the role out-of-school time can play in extending the capacity of schools. That's in just a moment on the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, where we feature conversations with researchers, practitioners, program developers, and advocates for young adolescents in the middle school years. Recently, I spoke with Lindsay Wood-Jeffries and Yasha Rusananguko from Higher Achievement. Lindsay is CEO and Yasha Director of Program Operations for the 45-year-old Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit serving middle school-age youth in the out-of-school time space with a blend of academic enrichment, mentoring, and community building, culminating in high school and ultimately college preparation. Higher Achievement serves students in communities in and around Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Richmond. While the program has been lauded for the increased academic achievement of students it serves, as Yasha notes, the more powerful outcomes may come from mentors who help youth see who they can become and build the social capital to make that happen.
Because I think oftentimes our scholars have like these checklists of things that they're supposed to, knock off. Like, I'm a student, I need to get good grades, and I need to, be on my best behavior. Great, but what do you want to be outside of that? Like, you want to be an architect? So like, what do we know about that? Like, how can we get you there? Who can we connect you with? Because so oftentimes our mentors have so many connections that are like beyond, I think, anything that I would have understood as a middle school student. And I think our students as well probably don't understand the magnitude, but knowing that someone is there in their corner that they can see weekly that is interested and willing to put them in places or say their names in places that oftentimes they would have never had access to, that's that opportunity gap right there, right? Like, so now we have someone who's in a place that could provide or advocate on behalf of another scholar or something like that to give them that exposure to see if this is something that they really want to do and tell them more about.
You can catch all of my conversation with Lindsay and Yasha in a previous episode. And now, returning for part two of my conversation with Nadia Selby and Elizabeth Micci. And maybe you both can talk about this notion of partnerships, because I think, Nadia, in order to make all of that work, I'm struck by, if you take Google as an example, if I'm a student, maybe math is not my thing, so I think Google's a technology company. These large companies especially, they have so many different things that you could do there. They have people in marketing, they have people in HR. There's lots of different types of things you can do for a company like that. A lot of young kids want to play sports. They want to play sports professionally, and they think of themselves on the ball field, but there's so many things that you can do associated with sports. There's sports marketing, there's facilities management, there's all sorts of things. So getting them sort of exposed to those things, and also the partnerships with the schools. If I'm an educator, if I'm somebody who works, at Google or another sort of company, and listening to this podcast, just paint them a picture of how you go about that partnership process with schools, with communities, with organizations. If I'm a principal or district administrator, and I'm like, yes, I'm trying to figure out a way to get more experiential learning into the classroom, or I want to do more in schools to support students. How does that happen with Citizen Schools? What do they do? What do you do to make partnerships happen and work well?
One thing that I think we're really adamant about, because we've learned kind of going into these partnerships, is that there really be support and backing for this kind of work at sort of every level of the system before we're willing to sort of start that partnership up. So when we first engage with a potential school partner, whether it's a district partner, someone from the district, perhaps who works in curriculum that is really interested in bringing a program like this to their school, or a principal or school leader, a dean of instruction, somebody at the administrative level of a school, or a teacher, and we've found partnerships, through all three avenues, we generally request that they bring sort of all of those people to the first or second meeting. So at some point, we want to speak to sort of everybody who is an authorizer in this environment to really make sure that commitment exists across the board. Because in our experience, best kinds of partners, it really has nothing to do with whether they have done experiential learning before. What we're looking for is a team of people who say, we have the ability to not only attempt this work, but again, sort of defend the environment around it to make it possible. Because what usually stands in the way of having these kinds of experience during the school day are pressures around other things. It's not the capacity of the teacher. It's not, the willingness of the students. It's not even the willingness of administrators. It's often that the system itself orients in a different direction, right? It's set up for students to be working by subject area, to be preparing most of the time for some sort of high stakes exam. And if you're going to do this work, you really need to create the space and time. So when we're talking to partners, we listen for people who really are looking at their priorities differently and are saying, we've decided that it is more important to us for our students to have exposure to how this work that they're doing during the school day is going to apply to their future life, whether it's in college or career or whatever. We want to make sure that they see that link, and we are committed to not only devoting resources, but also sort of time and defending the space to do it.
I would echo that and flip it a little bit when we talk about our volunteers and the partnerships in which we established there. Over the years, we've worked again through our expanded learning time program. That's where we started. So we did engage a lot of corporate volunteers like Google, like Fidelity, like these organizations that are really interested in just getting back out within the communities and really be able to do more for the students, and not just the let's give money and throw it away in that sense. It's more around like, hey, our employees can come out and support in different areas. So for us here at Citizen Schools, part of how that goes is essentially we go and we talk to corporations or folks who either reach out to us or we reach out to them, especially right now as we're recruiting like content experts or folks that have a specific expertise in certain areas for some of the projects we're applying for. We're going to you. We're asking if we can do an info session with your staff and with your team. And it's been such a really great partnership to kind of see the ways in which we have been able to engage. And on the back end, we did a study a few years ago in which we learned what were the benefits corporations and companies had from this experience when their employees went out. And a lot of it was like they saw better collaboration, better communication, and things like that within the company. Because if you got to talk to a middle schooler and explain to them certain pieces, you got to be very clear, and you got to make sure you're like your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, because they will call you out on it. Those types of ways have really transferred back over to employees actually going back to work and applying some of the same things they were using with students with the adults that they had to do teamwork with.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about talent if we can. I think it's, from my perspective, Citizen Schools has been known for being a pioneer certainly in the out of school time space for its approach to talent and the investment in human capital. And the out of school time space has come a long way for sure, but historically the folks who work in the space, the individuals who work directly with young people and deliver the programming, have been undertrained, underpaid, underinvested in. And obviously AmeriCorps has helped change the dynamic some, but the Citizen Schools Teaching Fellowship, which Nadia, you are a product of, has made a mark in the field and has been replicated. The program that I ran for a time, Spark, developed our own version of a teaching fellowship, and it's really kind of known as one of the premier programs, probably up there with City Year and so forth. For those unfamiliar, say a little bit about your approach to talent and human capital, which is as important, I think, as programming when it comes to impact. Both the people that you find and you train that go into the out-of-school time space, and also, Elizabeth, you were talking about a lot of these coaches. Who are these people? How do you get them to be who they can be to support the educators and the young people?
Yes, I am a product of the teaching fellowship, and I did my teaching fellowship in Massachusetts as well as an AmeriCorps alum. I just want to make sure I name that because I really did love my service experience through AmeriCorps. And basically, Citizen Schools is essentially trying to get folks interested in education and interested in this education equity overall. So we recruit a lot from colleges and students who, I'm not quite sure if I want to be a teacher, but I really like education and I want to see what else is out there. The teaching fellowship actually puts you in a space for you to understand the school system, how the school system is layered. We provide you with the training, the coaching necessary to be able to enter into those spaces. And then throughout your teaching fellowship, it's a 2-year program. When we had the teaching fellowship, it was 2 years, and you would participate year one, really getting your feet on the ground, really understanding you have these lead roles in which you might be the community liaison, where you're working with community members and working with corporate volunteers, but you're also, in that same breath, you're also leading a group of students and learning what the power is in building strong relationships and connecting with young people to ignite their learning. And then the flip side of that, as you go into your second year, you're starting to understand, okay, where do I see myself in this ecosystem? Do I see myself as an educator and a teacher? And Citizen Schools provides opportunities for you to have career fairs and things come in where we have, if you're interested in education, you have a good pathway to be able to interview with some of the larger organizations that are training and developing teachers. And then it just opens the door to kind of see, where are the areas that you can actually continue to make an effort within the communities and expanding community education as a whole.
And I think we take a similar approach in how we find and develop the coaches in Catalyst, both on the sort of teacher training side and on the volunteer side. These folks tend to come, our coaches tend to come from the classroom, people who have had some kind of exposure to trying to implement this kind of work in a middle school space, because we understand that that's the way firsthand what some of the struggles that our teachers are going to be facing look like, and can have that sort of empathy for the various pressures that are coming at them from different angles. Many of our volunteer recruiters and trainers have done this work frequently in some other sort of social context. They are prepared as a group, both the volunteer coaches and the teacher coaches, to help our volunteers and teachers deal with the ambiguity of the environment. So we tend to use the kinds of internal professional development and training that you would often see sort of reserved for the executive team in a lot of environments for our entire team, because the way we see it is that pretty much everybody in our division is making really big decisions on a day-to-day basis that are going to sort of drive the success of their work. There are no widgets here. There's nobody who's just sort of, on an assembly line stamping something and letting it move forward. Everybody has to make game time critical decisions regularly, and they need to be able to handle the ambiguity and shifts that come with their own work. Shout out to our team. They did an incredible job in the year in the last year with COVID and the various sort of, new scenarios that popped up on an almost daily basis. And we believe that that developing them as sort of leaders and professionals in their own right, separate from the work that they're doing, helps sort of cultivate a level of commitment to the work that they're doing now, but also helps them envision what their long-term trajectory and work could be for the sector, whether it's with us or somewhere else.
In our remaining moments here, let's talk about what's next, both for citizen schools and also for the field. I've been a big believer, as I'm sure you all have been, in out-of-school time, and I feel like more than ever now, there's a recognition that out-of-school time, after-school summer learning is really essential, especially perhaps for young adolescents. And you're doing more work in school, so there's a greater recognition that schools need partners to be successful, to add to their capacity, to offer terrific learning experiences. So what do you think about the field of education as a whole and where it's going and citizen schools' place in that?
As an organization, it is a lot of work, but it's big, exciting work that I think the program team within Citizen Schools is ready for as we look ahead. We're evolving a little bit. We're shifting and starting to think a little bit about like what are the pieces of Citizen Schools that really are making an impact within the communities and so forth that we serve. And we're really taking a pause in looking at what our community needs are and designing programs and designing ways to impact that community based off of what we are experts on. Imagine a world where your community, and as a student within your community, you have access to hands-on engaging activities and caring adults, caring professionals in every space that you're in. You go to school, you have access and you see caring adults there. In your after-school program, you have an opportunity there to work with caring adults on hands-on engaging projects and activities. And then what about Saturdays you might go to the college that's nearby and they have a lab in which we have a maker fellow that supports building out maker-centered learning and these other hands-on engaging activities there that you are a part of. What if we created this ecosystem in which all of these folks within a community talk to each other and really are connected around creating the best ways to impact the students within that community? And then what if our volunteers all come from there as well? So it's creating this bubble, this ecosystem across the country is our hope to have these little pods, these little ecosystems of education equity that's happening where we're pulling and connecting the folks who are doing some of the work disjointedly across community into spaces where they're able to collaborate, where they're able to learn from each other, where they're able to talk to each other, where they're able to visit and see how the others are impacting and doing other things. We want to open the door. We want to work with other organizations. We want to work with other partners within the community to kind of really address and meet the needs of the community based off of what they say, not based off of what we want to be able to do.
And I think that this sort of move as an organization is in keeping with where we see the sector going. I think, the move into virtual learning has potentially expedited conversations that were already happening around shifts in terms of how you're looking at a school day and sort of where you think learning can happen and should happen. And I think philosophically, really, since its founding, Citizen Schools has pushed some boundaries around, where does rich learning happen? And I think that you're seeing sort of more awareness around the idea that if people are lifelong learners, if they're going to be working for much longer than they ever have in sort of the history of the world, if they're going to be asked to engage with potentially different careers or different forms of work throughout their lifetime, there needs to be continuous learning, and this learning should be happening in some respects alongside real authentic experiences. So this shift in strategy comes with what we see as a shift in sector away from saying, the school day happens or schooling or learning happens in this one space during these hours of the day, to saying that learning's happening all the time. So let's sort of equip students and the community to be learners and teachers in all of these different dimensions.
Finally, if there was one bit of advice based on your experience delivering a variety of hands-on experiential learning in out-of-school and in-school settings that you would offer to educators, both in school and in after school and in summer programs, of things they either ought to know or ought to be doing, what would it be?
Listen. I would say listen. There's one thing to do what you want to do, and there's another thing to listen to the needs of what's actually needed by the communities and the folks that you're quote unquote trying to help.
And I think for me, I would say, sort of embrace the unpredictability of what's coming. I think we're seeing sea changes in so many areas of society and so many ways of living and doing and being, and school will not be the exception to that. This environment will not be the exception to that, and it's coming. So the best thing to do is to lean into it and kind of and figure out how the things you're already doing and all of the things you already know can be leveraged to help you navigate these changes successfully instead of resisting it.
Nadia and Elizabeth, thank you so much. I've really appreciated this stroll down memory lane and all the terrific things that Citizen Schools has evolved into over time. Just thank you both for all that you're doing for young adolescents around the country and coming on the podcast to tell us about it.
Thank you for having us.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That was Nadia Selby and Elizabeth Micci from Citizen Schools. You can follow Citizen Schools online at citizenschools.org, on Facebook and Instagram at Citizen Schools, and on Twitter at CSchools. Thanks for joining the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, a production of Remaking Middle School, an initiative that seeks to transform the learning and development experience for young adolescents in the middle school years. Remaking Middle School brings together good educational practice in school and out of school with the latest developmental science. You can learn about Remaking Middle School or find more resources about the topics of this podcast on the web at remakingmiddleschool.org. Or learn more about the founding partner organizations, the University of Virginia's Youth-Nex Center on the web at education.virginia.edu/youth-nex, or on Twitter at youth_nex. And the Association for Middle Level Education on the web at amle.org or on Twitter at AMLE. The Lessons in Adolescence podcast is produced by Abby Gillespie and me, Jason Cascarino. Editing by Paige Waterhouse. You can listen to or download each episode at the Remaking Middle School website, on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for listening.